Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I call Mr. Breeden, please?
Please, Bible in your right hand. Repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thanks. Get down, make yourself comfortable.
Good morning, Mr. Breeden. My name is Jason Beer, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you tell us your full name, please?
Yes, it's John Andrew Breeden.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the provision of a witness statement in this case and for coming to the inquiry today to assist us in our investigation. You should have in front of you a hard copy of that witness statement dated the 15th of May 2023 and running to 51 pages. Can you look at the last page, please? Page 51.
Yes,
Is that your signature?
it is.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you. For the purposes of the transcript only, the URN is WITN 06700100. Can I start, please, with some questions about your career, your background and experience?
Yes.
I think you have a long history as an employee of the Post Office, running between 1997 to 2019, is that right?
That's correct.
So a 22-year employment history.
Yes.
Okay. And that's in a variety of roles, including, and I'm just going to list them to start with, Head of Management Process for Scotland and Northern Ireland,
Correct.
Head of Planning for the North Territory,
Yes.
Operations Manager and Area Service Manager in the Central Area.
I think the operations manager and the area service manager are two separate roles.
Yes, I meant them as two separate roles, but they were both in this, the Central Area, is that right?
The operations manager for the National Multiples team covered the whole country.
Thank you. And the Area Service Manager in the Central Area?
Central area.
And would you agree that your wide-ranging experience brought you into contact with many aspects of the Post Office as an organisation, from those working on the counter to more senior management?
Yes.
I think specifically from April 2005, you became responsible for the management of sub-postmaster contracts, is that right?
I thought it was 2006.
Let's have a look. And it's page...
Sorry, April 2005 to August. It's the different job titles.
Yeah, so paragraph 2.4 on page 2.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the date that, from then on, I'm particularly interested in management of sub-postmaster contracts.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And I think you were responsible for the central area of the country then.
That's correct, yes.
And when did that run, where did that area run from and to? Or what sort of area are we looking at?
It was the whole of Wales and really across from probably Liverpool to the Wash, and then from South Wales across above London into Norfolk, I think, or into the Wash area. Can't remember exactly.
And then from September 2006, you became National Contracts Manager. Is that right?
Yes, that's for the North area.
That was for the North area. So what function did the National Contracts Manager for the North area perform?
He was responsible for a team of contract advisors who were responsible for the deployment of the sub-postmaster contract, and anything that occurred really contractually within the lifetime of a sub-postmaster with the business. So from them joining, we were involved in the appointment of sub-postmasters through to their leaving, however that occurred.
You explain that in your statement. It's the entire postmaster journey from before the moment that they sign their contract until the termination of their employment, however that may have arisen.
Well, the termination of the contract, of however it would have arisen, yes.
Yes. And how frequently would you come into contact with sub-postmasters in that role?
Not terribly frequently.
Because you were a manager.
Correct.
And how frequently would the contracts managers or the contracts advisors come into contact with sub-postmasters?
Possibly daily.
On a daily basis?
Yes.
Thank you. Were there any other responsibilities of a national contracts manager?
We were involved in the appointments of temporary sub-postmasters
Yes.
and the actual appeals process as well, which was part of the contract.
Thank you. Anything else?
The development of processes and policies that impacted on our role. The policies and the processes usually were owned by a different team, and we were there to deploy them.
And you said you were involved in the development of those policies and processes.
Yeah, what used to happen is whoever was the owner of the policies would get the teams involved, usually that were responsible for deploying them, and we would have an input into them see how they would work on the ground.
Okay, thank you. When you made this witness statement to the inquiry, the 51-page document that you have just looked at, were you open and transparent in relation to all of the answers that you gave to the questions that you were asked?
I believe so.
I think it's right that you made a witness statement in what we call the GLO, or the group litigation proceedings.
I did.
And that stated the 24th of August 2018. You made two, in fact, I think, didn't you?
I can't honestly remember.
Okay. I'll give the reference for the first one, which is the most substantial one, poll 3026886. There's no need to display that for the moment. And you gave evidence in the High Court.
I did.
And I think you probably know that the trial judge, Mr. Justice Fraser, was critical of your evidence.
Yes.
If we can look at that, please. Poll 3022936. Thank you. We can see that this is his common issues judgment, the trial judge, Mr. Justice Fraser. If we just expand it a little bit.
Thank you.
So we can see the whole of the page. Thank you. And we'll see it's dated the 15th of March 2019, and it's his judgment number 3, common issues, which we don't look at very often in the inquiry. I just want to turn to the part that relates to you, and it's page 127 of the judgment. And can you see that there's a heading, Mr. John Breeden, above paragraph 395?
Yes.
And in paragraph 395, he sets out your background. I'm not going to read that. And then in 396, he says that your witness statement covered 2 main areas. These were selection and appointment of sub-postmasters, the beginning of their relationship with the post office, and suspension and termination, the end. And then if we look at 397, please, he, that's you, accepted that compulsory recording of interviews with applicants commenced on the 31st of March 2008. He'd misstated the date in his statement as 2006, but explained he'd done this from memory without checking the documents. He also stated, that's you, quote, both the sub-postmaster, i.e. the SPMC, and NT contracts contain important provisions governing how these contracts may be brought to an end. Prior to accepting his appointment, a sub-postmaster has the opportunity to review his contract, end of quote. That very general statement is correct, only so far as the NTC is concerned. On the evidence I've accepted from the lead claimants, it's not even remotely accurate. or correct for at least some who contracted on the SPMC, and those affected could be a large number. Mr. Breeden is a senior person within the Post Office and must have known that this general statement was not wholly correct. This is an example, I consider, of PR-driven evidence. We're going to come back a little later this morning to what the SPMC contract was and what the NT contract was. But if we skip over 398 and 399, and if we go to his next essential finding, which is paragraph 400, initially he, that's you, said that there was no material difference in the SPMC and NTC terms. The latter was just more explicit. That is simply not correct, and I do not accept that Mr. Breeden could believe it was. At one point in his evidence, the following exchange took place. Quote, question, is it fair to say Post Office doesn't tend to focus on the precise words of a contract? You know what your interpretation is, and that is what everyone is working to. Your answer, that is the way I would operate, yes. Paragraph 401. This is obviously a very different approach to the interpretation and application of contract terms than is conventional under English law. The words of a contract are extremely important. Here there are SPMs under both the SPMC and NTC. Mr. Breeden's evidence makes it clear that the Post Office does not trouble itself with the particular words. And then if we skip paragraph 402 to 406 and pick up at 407, Mr. Breeden also explained that the support services resolution team within the Post Office would be able to interrogate the accounts that came from any particular branch. He also said that his understanding was that this team could investigate shortfalls that a sub-postmaster maintained had been caused by software issues, such as defects or bugs. And this could be done by comparing data from the branch with data in what he called, quote, secondary records held by Fujitsu, which would be between the Post Office and its clients. And then this paragraph 408. As with the other more senior members of the Post Office group of witnesses, Mr. Breeden is articulate, intelligent, and also acutely aware of how much the reputation of the Post Office hinges on these proceedings. His evidence was presented in terms obviously designed to put the best possible gloss on the Post Office on matters, and some of his statements simply did not stand scrutiny. The one I've explained above, that SPMs had the chance to review their contracts before appointment, was expressly preceded by a statement that made clear he was referred both to the SPMC and the NTC. Such evidence is, in my judgment, inaccurate, and inaccurate factual evidence is not helpful. When faced with the actual documents, he would agree with Mr. Green, that's counsel for the claimant, points to the contrary. But one reason why the factual part of the Common Issues trial became so protracted is because of this approach by the Post Office generally. Agreement to even obvious points would be reached eventually, but getting there took much longer and a great deal more effort than it ever ought to have done. His evidence was again given through a PR prism. Now, I'm not going to ask you whether you agree or disagree with these adverse findings from the judge, because that's nothing to the point at the moment. But the issue I'd like your help with is this. When you made your inquiry witness statement, did you bear in mind these findings of the judge, that you had given evidence by putting the best possible gloss on matters for the Post Office, and that you had given evidence, as he put it, through a public relations prism?
What, in making the current my current
Yes.
statement? No.
Why not?
I didn't feel that was something I wanted to take into account. I have read this document. I read this document after the hearing that the judge produced. Read it, accepted what he said, because that was the only thing I could do. But I didn't think of a PR prism or whatever the last comment was, that this statement should be presented through that.
So have you tried in your current inquiry witness statement, the 51-page statement, to be open and transparent and give an unvarnished account in relation to all matters?
I have tried to be as accurate as I possibly can, taking into account that it is a number of years since I've worked for Post Office Limited, and didn't take these comments into account. So yes.
Accuracy is one thing. I'm asking about openness and transparency. Have you tried to give an unvarnished account?
I've tried to be as open as I possibly can.
Can we look, please, at poll 406671? Thank you. If we just expand the top part, you can see that this is printed on Womble Bond Dickinson paper, and it's described as personal attendance, i.e. an attendance note on you of the 19th of January 2018. And it's with, you can see the name Lucy Bremner in those second set of tram lines, and another lady called Victoria Brooks. Can you see that?
Yes.
Do you remember attending the offices, the London offices of Womble Bond Dickinson?
Yes.
At the beginning of that year, for the purposes of, I think, giving what they describe as a proof of evidence, so a pre-witness statement document, eventually for the purposes of giving a witness statement in the group litigation?
I remember attending. I couldn't tell you exactly the date or when it was.
You'll see that it isn't in fact an attendance note as lawyers would understand it. It's a record of a typed up version of a recording of your meeting. Do you remember the meeting was recorded?
Yes.
If we just scroll down, please. Just stop there. The paragraph beginning, you're the most organised person we've met. And just above that, you can see there's some introductory exchanges between you and Miss Brooks. And in the passage that's highlighted, it says, you're the most organised person we've met because so far we will support and humour them. So that is quite good to see that you have, sorry, I did not give you a minute to sort yourself out, but we've got Wi-Fi and everything that you can connect to if you want. So as you know, the meeting is being recorded. Yes?
Yes.
I think that's a typed up version of the recording, her saying that this meeting is recorded. And this is indeed a very long document. It's 64 pages of single-spaced recording of everything that everyone said in the meeting. She continues. The purpose of the meeting is to obtain a proof of evidence from you. That's really just a document that records what you say to us today. We want to know all of the good and all of the bad, because we want to know about any weaknesses in Post Office's case, as well as any good points, so that we can advise them properly on what their position is. So I will be asking you what you think the weaknesses was in this, if any, that sort of question. And you say, and can come back, and can that come back to haunt me at a later date? And she answers your question about being haunted. It is only an internal document, so that is the difference between a proof of evidence and a witness statement. It's just for us to use internally. So what we will do is what you say, if it does not come out in a logical way, then we may reorganise it. So it is all done by topic, but we will not be changing it or removing anything. With a witness statement, we might remove things that we did not want to say, or polish it, or, probe a bit further. And that is a document that will be shared with the other side. So because this one is just internal, it should not come back to haunt you. In the light of those exchanges there, that the lawyer was telling you that they wanted to know all of the good and all of the bad, that they wanted to know about any weaknesses in the Post Office's case, and you receiving reassurance that what you said couldn't come back to haunt you at a later stage, did you feel able to speak freely and openly in this interview with Womble Bond Dickinson?
From the best of my recollection, yes.
And did you feel able to speak openly to these two Womble Bond Dickinson solicitors because you believed that what you said would not come out in the future?
I just tried to be as honest as I could at the time.
And was that because you thought that this was, at least initially, being said behind closed doors?
I thought that, yes.
I'm going to take you to some passages in what you say here, and I hope that it isn't too haunting for you. Can we look, please, at page 59? It'll come up on the screen, please.
Okay.
We can pick it up, third paragraph. You say, but it is exceptionally frustrating at the moment, massively frustrating. And I would think I do not even know how many people know this is going on, because we only tell good news. We do not tell bad news. That is the impression we get.
Yeah.
At this date, the beginning of January 2018, was it the case that the Post Office only told good news?
I'm just trying to think of the context in which that comment was actually made.
If you want to look back at the bottom of page 58, if we go back a page, please, and scroll down to the bottom half of the page. And maybe if you just read to yourself the bottom three paragraphs.
Could you just...
Yes, and then over the page, please.
Sorry, could you just repeat your question now to me?
Yes. Was it the case in January 2018, the beginning of January 18, when you were speaking here, that the Post Office only told good news?
I think there was my view and recollection from now is, yes, there was more emphasis put on the good and not on the things that perhaps weren't as good.
You say here, we do not tell bad news. For how long had that been the position?
For quite a number of years, I think.
And when you say there, we only tell good news, we do not tell bad news. What kind of issues were you referring to? Who was the telling to? To the sub-postmaster community or to the public or both?
Or perhaps even internally. I'm struggling to recollect the sort of context of that particular comment. But
The context was the previous page.
yeah,
where
we
you
don't tell bad news.
Yeah.
I think there was a desire to, yes, publicise good news and not perhaps be as balanced in the both internally and externally.
And was that a new thing come the beginning of 2018, or had it persisted for some time?
In my view, that had been going on for a while.
By a while, how long do you mean?
A number of years. I mean, say the only real sort of example that springs to mind that I can share with you is that when sort of issues started arising with Horizon and different events were happening externally, my recollection is that we would get some sort of communication internally about how robust the system was, how many transactions it did, and there was sort of almost a sort of, you know, the system is accurate and 100% right, which is, you know, what I believed at the time, because I had no other grounds to doubt it. But
just stopping there, that's not focusing from your perspective on the good news and not telling the bad news. That's just telling the only news.
Right.
That Horizon is accurate, if that's all you knew. Isn't it? This tends to speak to the suppression of bad news stories, doesn't it?
Well, I guess a lot of the work that I was involved in was not good news. You know, dealing with sort of contractual matters wasn't something that was a good news story. So the post office would never sort of say how many sort of issues there'd been or how many suspensions there'd been, I don't think.
And so this that we read here includes, in your view, issues relating to the operation of the Horizon system? I'm
thinking it could do. I mean, say, in looking at the sort of previous paragraphs, the line looks as if it was also about the sort of viability of the sort of branches, because it talks about... can we just go back?
Yeah, back to page 58, please, and look at the bottom. I mean, the bad things that I noticed in the previous paragraphs were 3 paragraphs from the bottom. I think the only thing you need to just add into all of that is the complexity. And I think when we explain to a new sub-postmaster during the NT sort of stuff, none of them knew what they were getting involved in from a complexity point of view.
Yeah. And I think I'm trying to make the point that, you know, for the level of complexity in running a post office was not low. And if you take sort of like the local model, which was included within the retail counter, there was an expectation that staff would move between the retail and the post office counter, and I think that was at times unrealistic. But that wasn't something that you would be promoting when you were trying to encourage people to take the model on.
At this time, by January 2018, had you formed the view that the post office as an organisation was focused on its brand image rather than doing the right thing by sub-postmasters?
I think the post office was always focused on its brand image because it had a very, very strong brand. That was part of the reason I joined the post office many years ago.
there was a second part to my question, namely at the expense of or over and above doing the right thing by sub-postmasters.
I think, perhaps knowing what I know now, yes, that might be a true statement.
And where did that culture come from, in your view?
I think it was just part of the DNA of the business.
And who was responsible for establishing the DNA of the business?
In my view, it came from the top.
Thank you, that can come down. Can I turn to the first issue then, the appointment of sub-postmasters and contractual issues?
Yeah.
You deal with that in your witness statement.
Yes.
At paragraphs 13 to 36. And if we just turn those up, please. That's page 5 of the witness statement, WITN 06700 0100. And page 5, please. And scroll down. So there's a whole subchapter of your statement here, appointment of sub-postmasters. And if we just scroll on, paragraph 13, over the page, all through 15, over the page, 17 over the page, and then over the page again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again, right up to page 16. And then at paragraph 37, we can just see it at the foot of the page there, you turn to deal with the contractual liability of sub-postmasters for shortfalls.
Yes.
And that's on pages 16, 17 and 18, if we just scroll through and see those. So they're the two topics that you're addressing here, appointment of sub-postmasters and then contractual issues, what's in their contract. You do not say in any of those paragraphs, in any of those 13 pages, nor anywhere else in the 51-page witness statement, anything about the inherent unfairness and undue risk for sub-postmasters in their contracts, do you?
No.
Can we look, please, at poll 406671? It's the recording of the attendance at Womblebond Dickinson again. And can we go to page 38, please? Top of the page, and some sort of spotty little oik like me coming in and working 4 hours a night, and he knows it's just sort of to keep the grant going and stuff like that, but he could lose me money that I'm liable for. There are a lot of tensions in my head, And the solicitor says, there is that, is really interesting, actually. And you say, I wouldn't do it. Having said, I will say, I wouldn't, and I think that next word should be sign, I wouldn't sign one of my contracts because I think there is too much weighted against you. You're on the hook to do everything. But that doesn't absolve people from, staying there and say the contract is unfair. You should have read it before you signed it, I think I'd be very cautious about it. Do you agree with me that that should read, I wouldn't sign one of my contracts rather than sell?
I think it's more likely to say sign, yes.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you sign a post office contract?
because I just thought the terms of them weren't something I personally would want to get into,
Because they were unfair.
because I thought they were not something I would want to get into.
Because you thought they were unfair.
From
Because
my perspective, I wouldn't have signed it because I just thought they were weighted against the sub-postmaster.
Why was there too much weighted against the sub-postmaster?
But it just felt to me that there was a lot of clauses in there that were things that could, you could lose your contract for. And there wasn't a great deal that going for that Pol were doing.
So I missed that last answer. There wasn't a good deal going for...
There wasn't a great deal coming from Post Office Limited. So the obligations were all on the sub-postmaster.
Was that a commonly held view amongst senior managers of your level?
I really don't know. That was my view.
And you were responsible for the team, or a team, that are sub-postmasters to sign these contracts?
Yes.
Was the view that you held one that was commonly understood amongst senior managers in the post office? Namely, that there was an imbalance of obligations, that the contract was weighted against sub-postmasters?
I honestly don't know. I can only tell you what my view was at the time.
If we go to page 58, please. Just to confirm that the words that you spoke earlier on page 38 had the meaning that I thought that they did. Just at the foot of the page there, it does not grab the hearts and minds of people. Mostly people walking down the streets does it. The solicitor says it's very interesting to hear your views on that. And then the next answer, you say, and like I say, I would not sign a contract, yes?
Yes.
And was that a view that you you held from at least 2005, April 2005 onwards?
No, I think that's a view that I probably came with more time passing in the latter part of my career with the post office.
But even though you held that view, you were responsible for years and years for a team that enabled sub-postmasters to sign these contracts and then enforce them against sub-postmasters.
Yeah, I think the sort of turning point was the contracts related to network transformation.
And is that 2011?
Yeah, I think that's when the programme started. But the contracts did evolve because they started with pilot contracts and then there was a number of iterations. There were many contracts.
Now, you've been quite forthright and open in this interview with the solicitors here, saying I have got national responsibilities for contracts with sub-postmasters. I wouldn't sign one. Why didn't you tell us that in your witness statement?
I don't know.
I asked you at the beginning a couple of times whether you were open and transparent
Yes.
in making your witness statement, and you said, yes, you tried to be.
I don't recall anything in the Rule 9 letter that perhaps would have elicited that sort of comment. I might be wrong.
Despite speaking for 16 pages about the terms and conditions of postmaster contracts, you didn't think it was relevant to say, I held down a job for a number of years at a national level, and I formed the view that the contracts we were asking the postmasters to sign were inherently unfair? Did we need to ask you the question? Did you think the contracts were fair or not? Mr. Breeden?
Yes, perhaps. I mean, say I don't know.
Can we turn to page 5 of this document, please? Just forgive me a moment. In the middle paragraph, the one starting, "Firstly, I'm probably not terribly attractive," which is presently at the foot of the page here. If we just scroll down a little bit. Thank you. About 6 lines up from the bottom of that paragraph, a sentence begins, and it's you speaking. And you say, "I thought this business always had very good values and morals and stuff like that. I think at the moment, some of those are sometimes just tested a little bit further than probably I feel 100% comfortable with. I think there's a point where, if my personal values and stuff like that did not particularly weigh, then I could not work in a place that, it does not matter how much money they're paying me, but where their actions are very diverse to what I believe is the right thing to do. That is when I would sort of struggle." The values and morals to which you refer there that were being tested further than you felt comfortable with, what were they?
That was the likes of openness, trustworthy, honesty.
How were your values and morals being tested by the Post Office?
I just thought some of the actions that were going on at that particular time, and that had no doubt happened earlier, were just starting to push the boundaries on some of these areas.
Which issues were pushing the boundaries of moralities and values?
Well, I think the way that as you know, I had issues with the contract.
Just stopping there, sorry. So this is again a reference back to the nature of the sub-postmaster contract, in part.
Well, I would say, if sorry, I thought you were asking me what things were sort of pushing my concerns.
Yes.
And I think one of them would have been the sub-postmaster's contract. I think another one would have been perhaps the sort of horizon activities that were going on.
And just stopping there, sorry to break it down. What were you referring to in particular then in your mind where the Post Office's values and morals were not in accordance with your own so far as Horizon was concerned?
Well, I mean, say, we were constantly being told that Horizon was okay, it was fit for purpose, and what it did was the right thing, which, it's clearly not the case.
You didn't know that by then?
No, I didn't know that by then, but I guess it's sort of just, you just start wondering, don't you, what's going on?
This seems to have something different in mind. This seems to, if I may say, be a statement that you realised, if it referred to Horizon, that you weren't being told the whole truth, or that the truth wasn't being told publicly.
I mean, so I can't I can't recall exactly what that was relating to, but I just felt that at that time that some of the things that were going on were I was struggling with.
Can you try and help us a little more, please? Because on the account you've given in your witness statement, you believed, right up until after the Horizon issues judgment in 2019, that Horizon had integrity and there were no material bugs, errors and defects. Mm-hmm. If this in part refers to Horizon, and you're speaking here in January 2018, what was in your mind?
Well, at that point in 2018, Horizon, in my mind, was accurate. But I think what's going on in your head is there must be something going on that we're perhaps not been told about. I don't know. Perhaps I was just overthinking it at the time, but because my job was so reliant on that piece of equipment being accurate. And, you know, from that point of view, you start thinking the what-ifs, I suppose, without any grounds to think them on, but perhaps that's the way I was thinking there.
Mr. Breeden, this is referring to reality here. You say that there are things that test you further than you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
You're referring there to something that actually happened.
Yeah.
Not imagining things,
okay.
Not overthinking things. What were the things that were happening that tested your values and morals more than you felt comfortable with?
Well, the only other thing that, because, to clarify, I did not know there was any issues with Horizon at that point. It would be the rollout of different programs that were going on in the business, because I think at that stage we'd be coming to the end of the change program and how that was perhaps being completed, because they were clearly the harder parts of the program to complete, the tail end.
In what way did the rollout of different programs test your values and morals?
Well,
more than you felt comfortable with?
I think at times we were, as a team, put under a bit of pressure to make appointments, to allow individual branches to be resolved and converted under the programme.
So we should read this part of this paragraph as referring to three things. Firstly, the unfair postmaster contract. Secondly, Horizon. And thirdly, the rolling out of new programmes.
Yes, but like I say, it was at that point, I didn't know there was any problems with Horizon.
We're going to come back to knowledge of problems with Horizon a little later today. Can I turn to a new topic that can come down, please?
Yeah.
At page 30 of your witness statement, please. Page 30. At paragraph 92, you say, in all the roles I had from 2006, I was responsible for deploying the processes related to suspensions and terminations. The preparation of the policies and processes to be followed was undertaken by a policy team, usually with input from those who deployed the policies and processes. So that's similar to what you said earlier today.
Yeah.
Do I understand that can come down, thank you, from this, that you had and your team had a role in the development and then signing off of policies concerning suspensions, terminations and the appeals process?
we had a role in the development, we had input into the development, but the sign-off was undertaken by whoever owned the policy.
I see. But then you had a role in implementing them, i.e. carrying them into effect.
Yes.
Now, we've heard evidence that there were two different types of contracts between the post office on the one hand and sub-postmasters on the other. The first was the sub-postmaster contract, the SPMC, yes, which was modified in 2006 and became known as the modified SPMC, correct?
Well, I think there was a modification. There were two separate contracts, but you could still be appointed on the first one you mentioned after 2006.
And then the second species of contract was the Network Transformation Contract, the NTC.
Yeah.
And that became used after the Network Transformation Programme, the NTP, was initiated in 2011. Does that sound right?
Yeah, there was... After 2011, there was still... Because I think when the programme started, there wasn't sufficient funding to transform the whole estate. It was only about half of it. So there was still offices that would continue on the what I would call the traditional sub-postmaster contract.
And so the SPMC was issued, would this be right, between the years 1994 and 2011 in the modified form after 2006, but new contracts were issued as the Network Transformation Contract after 2011?
I don't think that is correct, no.
Can you tell me then what is correct?
What I believe is correct is that the SPSMR, sub-postmaster contract,
Yes.
was available from the date in the 1990s
94.
that you mentioned, but that could still be issued into the beyond 2011,
Right.
because there were still branches that weren't suitable, for want of a better word, to go onto the Network Transformation Programme. So if there was any change in those offices, they would continue. What used to happen, just not to digress, but is that when a vacancy arose in the network, the Network Transformation Programme would model that to see what type of branch, whether it would be one under the Network Transformation Programme or not, or whether it would remain initially as a traditional contract. The modified contract, I'm struggling to remember this, but was not used wide scale across the network. There was, I can't remember how many there were, but they were issued in I think, more specific situations, perhaps where there'd been a Crown office that had converted.
I understand.
Yeah.
Let's look at a couple of species or versions of the contract.
Okay.
Can we start, please, with poll 400246? If we just go to page 3, please, and scroll down. We can see a list of amendments. The last one is 2006, and we can see the date of the document at the bottom right, bottom left, July 2006. Can you see that?
Yes, yes.
And if we can go to page 71, please. And it's paragraph 12. This is within section 8 of the contract under the heading losses.
Yes.
Quote, the sub-postmaster is responsible for all losses caused through his own negligence, carelessness or error, and also for losses of all kind caused by his assistants. Deficiencies due to such losses must be made good without delay.
Yes.
13, the financial responsibility of the sub-postmaster does not cease when he relinquishes his appointment, and he will be required to make good any losses incurred during his term of office, which may subsequently come to light. Is this the provision in paragraph 12 amongst those which you considered to be unfair, and therefore you personally wouldn't have signed it?
I personally wouldn't sign that.
And was that because that the contractual provision was a slanted foundation stone for establishing liability against a sub-postmaster?
I'm not sure what you're saying there.
You tell us then why you would include this as amongst the clauses in the contract that you would regard as unfair and therefore not sign.
It just felt to me personally it was very wide-reaching
And why was it wide-reaching?
because of the fact that it terms negligence, carelessness or error.
I'm sorry.
Because of the way the first sentence is worded, you know, through negligence, carelessness or error.
And what about the sentence, or the part of the sentence, which fixes the sub-postmaster for all losses
Yeah.
of all kinds caused by their assistants, whether they're responsible for or caused by negligence, carelessness or error?
Mm. It just seems a very catch-all sort of statement that I wouldn't have felt comfortable with.
Was it your view that nonetheless sub-postmasters wouldn't have contractual liability for shortfalls if they were caused by bugs, errors and defects in the Horizon system, not being their negligence, carelessness or error?
Well, if it's caused by not negligence, carelessness or error, I would suspect it wouldn't be, no.
Can I look then at what sub-postmasters were told when the Post Office sought to recover money from them, when it was sending letters before claim to them, and when it was considering suspending them and bringing proceedings against them? I just want to look at 3 example letters, if I may. Can we start with LCAS 301117? You'll see this is a letter to Mr. Lee Castleton, dated the 18th of August 2004. It's in respect of his branch, the Marine Drive Post Office. And if we just scroll down to the bottom, a bit more please, we can see who it's sent by.
Yes.
And agent's debt, is that Team 3, former sub-postmaster's accounts
Yeah, I would imagine that's Team 3.
in Chesterfield.
Yes.
And then just scroll back up to look at the terms of the letter. I'm writing to you in respect of a number of errors that have come to light in the accounts. The sum of £27,000 is due to the Post Office. I've attached a copy of our statement of errors. And then there's, since you are contractually obliged to make good any losses incurred during your term of office for up to 6 years, it would be appreciated if you could forward a cheque made payable to the Post Office for the amount to the address below within 21 days. Can we look please at poll 404671? We can see this is a letter dated 2010 March 2010 in the top right. It's a reminder letter to Pamela Stubbs at an office in Wokingham. And then at the foot of the page, please, current agent's debt team leader. This was sent by. And if we scroll up, please. Dear Mrs. Stubbs, I'm writing to you in respect to the recovery of outstanding debts in the accounts. According to our records, the sum of 17,000 odd pounds is overdue for payment. Since you are contractually obliged to make good any losses occurred during your term of office, please call the debt recovery team on the number quoted to settle this amount via credit or debit card. Alternatively, forward a cheque. Failure to meet these repayment terms may lead us to deduct the outstanding debt from your future remuneration. Then lastly, poll 304 4903. A little later in 2010, a letter to Alison Henderson in respect of the Worsted Post Office branch. Foot of the page, please. Former agent's debt team in Chesterfield. And then up, please. I'm writing to you in respect of the recovery of deficiencies found in the accounts at the above post office whilst you were sub-postmaster. The sum of just under £12,000 is due to post office to clear the account. Since you're contractually obliged to make good any losses incurred during your term of office, etc. Do you agree that this standard form of wording that we've seen in each of the three letters, you're contractually obliged to make good any losses during your term of office, materially misstates the contractual obligations of a sub-postmaster?
Misstates it?
Yes, it doesn't include the fact that the loss needs to be due to their
It's not using the
etc.
same terminology as is in the contractor.
It therefore misstates the obligation. It says you are contractually obliged to make good any losses.
Yeah.
That's just wrong, isn't it?
Yes, if they weren't made through carelessness, error.
That's an important qualification, even though you regarded it yourself as still unfair. It's not as wide as any losses whatsoever, is it?
No.
Would you regard that as just a matter of terminology?
I think that is a matter of terminology, yes.
Or would it represent the fact of a belief in senior management at this time that sub-postmasters were liable for all losses, irrespective of the cause of them?
Yes, I think it would.
Was that a commonly prevailing view? Sub-postmasters are liable for all losses.
I think as a generalisation, yes.
Is that, therefore, an example of what the judge described as the post office not really caring much about what the actual terms of the contract say, and instead relying on its own belief as to what it thought the position was?
I think that's potentially correct, yes.
And how did that come about? That state of mind?
I think it was there all the time.
Do you agree that that is poor behaviour by the post office, telling sub-postmaster that they've got to pay up under their contract thousands or tens of thousands of pounds because under their contract they're liable to make good any losses, when the contract didn't say that at all.
With hindsight, yes.
Why does it take hindsight to realise that?
I suppose you just get caught in the way things take place in a business, don't you?
So because the culture, the ethos, the morals of the business have developed in a certain way, you don't have regard to the true position according to contractual documents or the law?
What, me personally or post?
Yes, no, the post office.
Yeah, I think, well, I think there was a view that if you mentioned the contract, you know, things would happen.
Okay, so the mere mention of the contract.
Yeah, I think it's almost used as a little bit perhaps of a stick to get things done. Because I was very conscious that in my time there, that particularly when sort of developing stuff, that the appropriate interventions had taken place before something was referred to my team. And it was a matter that was a contractual matter, because that wasn't the case in all instances.
Thank you. Can we turn back to your witness statement, please?
Yeah.
And look at page 17. Page 17, paragraph 41. If we can just highlight 41, please. Page 17. That's it. You say where a loss had been incurred and the reason for the loss was known and a compensating error was expected to be issued, losses could be held in the suspense account. The sub-postmaster would have to have investigated the loss and know when it had occurred, i.e. a date, and have evidence of the error. Authority to hold the amount in the suspense account would be given by the agent debt team. This facility was only available where there was a known error.
Yeah.
Was the suspense account, on your understanding of it, only to be a safe haven for sums which were the product of an error that had already been established, therefore?
That was my understanding of suspense, yeah, that you had to have authority to put something into the suspense account. Authority
might be a different issue.
Okay.
I'm asking at the moment whether the suspense was a place, an account, to put sums which were the product of an error that had already been established, i.e. where the reason was known.
Yes.
And the postmaster had evidence of the error, which are the two things you mentioned here.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
Not to place sums which were in dispute and an investigation was necessary in order to establish the cause of the loss.
I think you probably, if you were disputing something, it could have been put in suspense as well.
Even if the cause of the error was not known and the sub-postmaster had no evidence in relation to the error, the cause of the error.
I think it would be highly unlikely then.
Sorry?
I think it would be unlikely.
That he would be allowed or she would be allowed to put it in suspense?
I don't think they'd be given authority to do that.
The judge, I'm not going to go through his many findings that established this, held in his common issues judgment that it was almost impossible for postmasters fully to investigate the causes of discrepancies or shortfalls in their branches due to their limited access to back office and computing information and data. How would a sub-postmaster establish the reason for the loss and produce evidence of it in those circumstances?
Just by looking through the printouts from Horizon.
And how would they establish that the cause of a loss was the system and not them either miskeying a sum, their staff miskeying a sum, or them or their staff not taking money or stock?
I don't know how they would do that.
It's an impossibility, isn't it?
I think it is.
On the data that they had available to them, they couldn't do it.
I wouldn't have thought so.
And yet, if they wanted to place a sum in suspense, they had to do it.
Yes.
Was this another example of unfairness, as you saw it, requiring sub-postmasters to undertake the impossible?
As you put it like that, it wasn't one that was perhaps at the forefront of my mind at the time, but as you put it like that, yes.
So I wonder whether we could take the morning break now. I was going to propose that we took lunch between 12:30 and 1:30 today, if that's acceptable to you, for a range of reasons, and therefore that would make the morning break now convenient until 11:25.
Yeah, that's fine. Could I just ask you in the first instance, Mr. Beer, or Mr. Breeden, these provisions that we're now talking about relating to the use of a suspense account, were they written into the contract, or were they independent of the contract, or subject to some kind of instruction, or what?
So I'm not going to give evidence. Let Mr. Breeden answer it. And even if I thought I knew the answer, I would phone a friend first to make sure that what I thought was correct.
It's just something that struck me as you were quite correctly pointing out the difference between the contractual provisions and the letters. It then made me wonder how these provisions about the use of the suspense account were regulated.
Yes.
So if you know the answer, Mr. Breeden, would you tell me? And if you don't, Mr. Beer will phone a friend.
Or could I phone a friend as well? I think...
I think at some stage, I'd just like to know the answer, that's all.
No, the suspense account, it wasn't a term in the contract.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would imagine that it was subject to what I'm going to term as like office instructions.
Right, yeah, no, I follow.
And by contact of the sort of expert domain within Post Office Limited. So, you know, if an error had occurred, they would no doubt ring Chesterfield, or if they had an issue, and that's where it would probably get advice from.
All right, thank you.
So I should say that that accords with my initial view before seeking confirmation of it, that in the iterations of the contract we've got, the operation of the suspense account is not a term of the contract. We've got over a dozen, I think, policies and instructions that address the operation of the suspense account. And we can look at those and maybe summarise those for you in due course.
Thank you very much. Do you need an extra few minutes now as a result of my intervention?
1:30, please, sir.
1:30, fine, yeah.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Breeden, can we continue by looking at a real-world example of some of the issues that we have just been speaking about by looking at poll 302-1163. This is an email thread from 2009 involving you, and I should read it all. It will take a little while to run through it, just so that you've got complete context before I ask you some questions about it. So can we go to page 5, please? And look at the foot of the page, please. And if we just scroll down a little bit further, we'll see who Karen was. Just onto page 6. A contract manager, North Central. So was that somebody that you had responsibility for in 2009? Yes, thank you. And so if we scroll back up, please, to the bottom of page 4. We can see the chain starts with her email to Gary Blackburn. We'll find out in a moment that he was part of the service delivery branch, and his job title was Live Service and Business Continuity Manager. Mr. Blackburn, what would a live service and business continuity manager do? Can you recall?
I couldn't honestly hazard a guess.
Right, okay. Karen Arnold says, Gary, further to our conversation last week regarding the losses at Hogsthorpe, and you can see the subject title of the email is Hogsthorpe, and then there's a FAD code, yes?
Yes.
The sub-postmaster, David Hedges, who likes to be known as Tom, has contacted the MBSC to establish what the BAU, the business as usual, I think that means,
yes,
stroke correct processes for suspending a session of SmartPost. Tom tells me that the NBSC said it was okay to use either of the methods he describes. As a reminder, I've copied information below in respect of what he described to me last week over the page. Then there's the cut-in passage, which Tom, Mr. Hedges, had described. Tom said that he does a lot of postage, and customers come in and leave their items of mail and a blank cheque so they don't have to wait. He then processes the items in between serving other customers. Previously, he would have several items on the sales stack, items for which labels had been printed, and if a customer came in, he would suspend the session from the SmartPost screen and serve other customers before going back and swapping back into the suspended session. This would take him straight back to the SmartPost screen. But when he initially suspended the session, it would take a long time, as it also did when he swapped to go back into the suspended session. Around the time the losses started, he changed how he suspended the session. Items in the sales stack and in SmartPost, when a customer came in, he started going back to serve the customer, suspending the session from there, would serve other customers and then swap to go back into the suspended session. By doing it this way, it took him back to the serve customer screen, and both the suspending of the session and returning back into the suspended session was far quicker this way than how it did previously. And then Karen Arnold continues. Tom also spoke to the Horizon help desk yesterday about this, and also the losses which he believes have started since he changed his procedures, and a reference number is given. I understand from Tom that a visit has now been arranged today to swap the central processor. Once this swap out has been completed, can you tell me whether any investigation is carried out with the old processor? As I mentioned last week, if losses continue, then I could end up with a conduct case. Just stopping there, what would you understand a conduct case to mean?
Certainly, as a minimum, getting the postmaster to have a conversation with Karen to find out what we're doing with the losses ultimately could end up as a suspension. And
so it's going down a track of sort of misconduct potentially.
Yes.
Which could end up in suspension and dismissal.
Yes.
Okay. Carrying on, if this does happen, then the sub-postmaster will have the opportunity of attending an interview in which I'm sure he will raise what he believes is an issue with SmartPost suspended sessions contributing to losses at the branch. At this point, it will have to be investigated. I therefore feel it would be beneficial to do this now and would appreciate your help with this. Regards, Karen. So you understand, I think, the issue being raised here. Is this a fair summary? A sub-postmaster suspending sessions whilst in SmartPost,
Yes.
changing the manner in which he suspended the sessions and alleging that that change was causing losses to show.
Yeah, I understand. You know, I've read the text and see. I'm not familiar with all the suspending sessions. I can't remember
No.
all those sort of things.
That's not necessary for the moment, but we can, I think we can understand what's happening here. A sub-postmaster saying, I'm using the system and it is creating losses which are not true losses. It's the way the system is operating. And your contracts advisor is saying this could end up, if they swap out the old processor and put in a new one and the losses continue, in a conduct or misconduct case. Okay? Can we, and she's saying, can we investigate it now, not halfway through a conduct case?
Yeah.
Yes? Or when we're into a conduct case? Can we investigate what the cause of the losses actually is now, rather than as part of a conduct case? Yes?
Yes. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, thank you. And then if we go back to page 4, please, and scroll down. Thank you. Just up a bit, sorry. A bit more, please, to see Gary's reply. That's it. Mr. Blackburn replies, Karen, Fujitsu would not check a replaced processor automatically, but I don't believe that would add any value in this instance. As we discussed last week, the most likely explanation was or is user error. But given the calls into MBSC and HSD, we should assume this is not the root cause at this time. However, kicking off any other type of investigation is dependent on transactional evidence of SmartPost suspend creating discrepancies. Does Tom have any? I assume he believes that Horizon is committing each mail item stroke costs each time that he goes into suspend, and therefore on multiple occasions. If Tom has specific information, such as transaction time and values, please send this across and I'll get Fujitsu to investigate immediately. If he's no evidence, then I'm afraid there's nothing for Fujitsu to investigate. And then back to page 3, please. Karen's reply, Gary, I'm not sure why Fujitsu would be changing the processor if they didn't think there was a problem. Having spoken to Tom today, once the new processor is installed, he's going to do a BP rollover. Can you remember what BP rollovers were?
I can't remember what BP means now. Branch. No, sorry, it's gone. BP.
Was it to do with balancing?
Yes. Is it the rollover to the next period? I think. I can't remember what BP stands for.
Okay.
Just off the top of my head.
And then keep a tally manually of every SmartPost item to check against Horizon. This, however, won't help with anything that has gone previously. So he, the postmaster, once the new processor's in, says that he's going to keep a manual tally, so like a handwritten tally of every SmartPost item to check against Horizon. But that's not going to help with the past. You can see that you're now copied into this email chain. Can you see that at the top?
Yeah.
And then if we go to the foot of page 2, please. Mr. Blackburn replies, Fujitsu have always had a preventative maintenance policy and therefore sometimes will swap out kit without actually finding a fault. It also generally helps with customer perception of the service they've received. I accept in this instance that this policy could work against us, but are you suggesting that if, after swapping the processor and all discrepancies cease, that Tom will claim that is clear proof of Horizon calling discrepancies? I strongly suggest that Tom obtains the necessary evidence now if it's available. I'm not trying to be obstructive, but at present we have nothing to work on. And then to the bottom of page 2, please. So bottom of page 1. You sent an email. Can you see this on the 3rd of July?
Yeah.
Gary, I've read the recent emails on the above and considered the information. I'm concerned if we swap the processor now and the errors stop, this could lead to, 1, a claim that Horizon has problems in its accuracy and fuel some of the recent press articles. And 2, the sub-postmaster will claim that all previous errors are down to Horizon, and we have no way to disprove this if everything is resolved when the new processor is installed. Point 1 above would also concern me, as I've no doubt this individual is not the only one that uses SmartPost in this way. So we could end up with other claims in respect of this issue, where we have insisted that the sub-postmaster makes the loss good. And then over the page, I would prefer a more staged approach be taken to this issue, where we try to identify the problem by a method that will eliminate potentially different scenarios. I'm not sure how easy or difficult this would be to do, but if this sub-postmaster was, for example, removing money from the till, and he stopped doing this when the processor is removed, we have not proved it was the processor that was at fault. All we have stopped is money going missing. I think we need to think this one through carefully, and the sub-postmaster should be providing evidence to support his claims, which can be investigated before we change pieces of equipment. If you wish to discuss, please give me a ring. Just go back to the foot of page 1, please. Thank you. You say that you're concerned that if the processor is changed and the errors stop, this could lead to a claim that Horizon has problems in its accuracy and fuel some of the recent press articles. Is that a written expression of what you described earlier, a desire on the part of the Post Office to protect the Post Office brand and Horizon in particular?
I guess it could be, yes. I didn't really think of it in that light until you've mentioned it.
Were you operating on a presumption here that the alleged debt was owed until it was disproved by the sub-postmaster?
I think I was working on a presumption that we needed to understand what had happened in the office and take an approach which perhaps eliminated things as we went through and didn't cause us more problems than they solved.
You understood, I think, in the context of this exchange, that Mr. Hedges may have been suspended in connection with the conduct case arising from the losses that he believed were caused by the system.
Yes. That's ultimately where it could have gone.
And even more ultimately, Mr. Hedges could have been dismissed at the conclusion of that conduct case.
That is one of the possible outcomes of a conduct case, depending on what investigations come to light.
And he could have been required to repay the losses.
Correct.
And could conceivably have been subject to a prosecution.
That is a possibility, but not something that was in my remit.
Given the information that you had been given about the problem that Mr. Hedges alleged, why would you not wish to investigate whether in fact the processor was reliable or not?
Well, I think that's what I was trying to say there in the point that I make, is that I think we needed to take a staged approach, of which checking the processor might be one of those stages.
Why would you be concerned that stopping the processor swapping the processor might lead to the errors stopping?
Well, the swapping the processor doesn't necessarily mean that if the errors stopped, it was down to the processor. I think it was will have been my train of thought there.
That he could have been stealing the money and had then stopped stealing the money at the point of the change of the processor.
Well, that something else could have been going on that wasn't down to the processor.
Was him stealing the money one of those other things that could have been going on in your mind?
I you know, this is back in 2009, so I can't really remember what my mind was thinking at the time, but I would imagine that's one of the options that would have been going through my mind.
Just go over the page, please. In this continuation of your email, in the third line, you say, if this sub-postmaster was, for example, removing money from the till, and he stopped doing this when the processor is removed, and we've not proved it was the processor that was at fault, all we've stopped is money going missing. Yeah, it seems to be that.
So it was clearly in my mind at the time.
You refer here to the recent press articles.
Yes.
What were the recent press articles?
Crikey, I honestly don't recall back in 2009 what the press articles were. I know, I think it's a computing magazine had done several articles around.
Computer Weekly.
I can't remember the title of it,
Okay.
but they'd done articles on Horizon, and I'm sorry, I just can't remember which article I'm referring to there.
Wouldn't the existence of other articles complaining of other faults with Horizon be more of a reason to investigate the alleged fault fully rather than less of a reason?
Yeah, I don't think I'm suggesting we don't investigate it fully, but I was suggesting we take a more staged approach to the investigation.
And what were those stages?
Well, I think it was trying to, what probably was going through my mind at the time is they're trying to eliminate different sources that could have created the problem, of which one would be, no doubt, the processor.
How could the sub-postmaster produce evidence that Horizon was the cause of the alleged loss?
I honestly don't know.
Just go back to the foot of the first page, please.
I think it was in the text a little bit earlier, there was comment about the sub-postmaster providing evidence.
What evidence did you think he could provide?
I wasn't sure.
I mean, it seems again that your decision-making is coloured by the possibility of undermining the belief in the integrity of Horizon. Would you agree?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it was, but I was trying to just be more constructive in the way we, or methodical in the way we investigated it.
And so what did you think would happen
Hopefully,
as a result of your email?
hopefully we'd get to the bottom of whatever was causing the problem.
And how? If the sub-postmaster couldn't produce evidence that Horizon was at fault, all he could say is that I know that when I use the smart post system in this way, in this sequence, it causes losses on my account, which are not true losses.
Yeah, I didn't know whether something could be printed at that point in the from Horizon.
What was the route for a link between you and your team, who were responsible for making decisions and giving advice about issues such as this, and those responsible for the intricacies of the operation of the Horizon system?
What you mean, how we got information?
Yes.
By the likes of people like Gary Blackburn, the teams that were responsible for the Horizon equipment.
I'm thinking of if you didn't know how a sub-postmaster could prove that what he was saying was true, or what he was saying could be tested, to whom would you turn to say, we've got a sub-postmaster who alleges the following?
Yeah.
He alleges that when he uses Smart Post and presses the screen in this sequence,
Yeah.
losses that are phantom losses are created.
Yeah.
Please tell me what questions I need to ask him. Please tell me what data the system will produce to prove or disprove that which he says. Who would you turn to?
I'd be looking towards the experts on Horizon. And
But who are they?
Well, I can't remember what you termed Mr. Blackburn's job as, but I think there was a team based up in the Rotherham area that were sort of linked the conduit.
I mean, his job title's on page 4.
Yeah, I find job titles a little confusing.
Well, on that, I think we can at least agree. Page 4 in the middle, please. And scroll down, please.
But there was her...
Live service and business continuity manager
Yeah.
in Barnsley.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell you what he does and whether he knows anything about Horizon, correct?
No, it doesn't tell me anything.
But who broadening it out from these narrow circumstances,
Yeah.
would you and your team turn to for technical advice where you've got a case just like this?
Yeah.
Postmaster says X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
We need to test whether X, Y, and Z are true.
Yeah.
Does Horizon operate in this way? Is it conceivable that the sub-postmaster is correct? What data is produced by Horizon? What back office data is kept by Post Office and Fujitsu to help us navigate our way through these allegations?
I do believe that Gary Blackburn, this is continuity, Horizon continuity, business system continuity, and he had a team of people in Barnsley or Rotherham that dealt with this and would be, in my view, what you would class as the expert domain.
And so you would expect Mr. Blackburn to be able to say, look, we can investigate this as follows by going back to Fujitsu or by the data that we've already got to see whether what Tom says is true or not.
I would be expecting somebody with, whether it was Mr. Blackburn, but Mr. Blackburn to know how it could be investigated.
Thank you, that can come down. Can we turn to paragraph 90 of your witness statement, which is on page 29. It's at the foot of the page. You say, I've reflected on whether I noticed any increase in sub-postmaster losses or an increase in the number of write-offs agreed following the introduction of Horizon. I do not recall an increase in losses following the introduction of Horizon. But once the reliability of the system began to be questioned, I recall there were more cases where Horizon was blamed for the loss, and that this was cited as a way to challenge debts. I don't recall there was an increase in write-offs by my team. The inquiry has seen evidence. I'll give the reference. It's NFSP 400515 at page 15 that suggests that by March 2001 there was about £10 million in suspense accounts as opposed to about £2 million 18 months before. So in an 18-month period, the amount in suspense accounts had increased from 2 million to 10 million pounds, covering the period of the introduction of Horizon. Is it your evidence that you were not aware of such an increase in claimed discrepancies or losses after the introduction of Horizon?
I wasn't aware of those figures that you've just quoted.
Were you aware of an increased use, without reference to the figures, in the use of the suspense account after the introduction of Horizon?
No.
You say here, once the reliability of the system began to be questioned, I recall there were more cases where Horizon was blamed for the loss, and this was cited as a way to challenge debts. What period are you referring to there, once the reliability of the system began to be questioned?
I think this was after the JSFA, and I can't remember when they that body was created, but as that started to pick up momentum, so I'm not sure exactly the time period on this. I'm sort of hesitating around 2011, 2012, but I don't know with any certainty.
And you say this was cited as a way to challenge debts. Cited by who?
By the postmaster.
The way that that sentence reads suggests that you believe that it wasn't a genuine belief that Horizon was to blame for the debt. What you're saying here...
On the part of the claimant, you mean?
Yes.
Well, at that time, I had no grounds on which to believe that there was an issue with Horizon.
And so what we should read this sentence as meaning is that you believed that sub-postmasters were falsely claiming that Horizon was responsible, and they were doing so because of publicity, and that this was just a mechanism or a vehicle for explaining away debt.
I don't think that's probably what was going through my mind when I wrote that sentence.
Tell us what it means then.
Well, I can understand exactly why you've taken that interpretation.
If my interpretation is incorrect, what is the correct interpretation?
Well, all I was trying to say in what perhaps is not a very well-worded sentence was that the instances started to increase for Horizon being sort of blamed for her losses. Whether that was, I didn't want to indicate that the postmaster was doing, not telling the truth. That wasn't the purpose of what I was trying to say.
It's the use of your words, this was cited as a way to challenge debts.
Yes, and I understand what you're picking up on there.
Well, I'm picking up on it because the words are there in black and white.
Yeah, no, I know. And what I'm saying is perhaps it's not the best worded sentence I've ever put together.
Isn't it revelatory of your true belief and those around you's beliefs also, that this is just sub-postmasters jumping on a bandwagon? There's been some publicity about Horizon having faults, and sub-postmasters were being opportunists in blaming the system for their debts.
I don't think I'd have used the term bandwagon, but
Or some other similar expression?
yeah, okay. I mean, say at that time, yes, perhaps that was the way, I would be thinking.
Can we turn, please, to paragraph 103.2 of your witness statement, which is on page 32. I should read paragraph 102 first. You're dealing here with the suspension and termination process.
Okay.
And you say when a shortage was identified at an audit, the lead auditor would telephone the contract advisor to discuss the audit findings. The contract advisor would speak to the sub-postmaster to establish the reasons for the shortage and might also, where appropriate, have contacted other teams. The contract advisor would gather as much information as possible. Factors consider, and I think this is factors to consider in whether to suspend,
Yes.
would include the following. This isn't a definitive list. And it's the second one, 103.2, source of risk, i.e. sub-postmaster or the staff
Yeah.
employed at the branch. The inquiry has heard a good deal of evidence where the support desks, including the third line of support, the SSC, could not identify the source of discrepancies and has heard evidence that sub-postmasters would not know themselves the cause of discrepancies. In circumstances where the cause of a discrepancy, a shortfall, was not known, what would be considered to be the source of the risk?
Well, it couldn't be identified if it wasn't there.
How would the source be attributed as between the sub-postmaster and staff employed at their branch?
Well, the sub-postmaster was ultimately responsible for the actions of their staff.
This tends to suggest, this paragraph, that there was a distinction drawn between whether the source of the risk was the sub-postmaster, him or herself, on the one hand, and his staff on the other, correct?
Yes.
In a case where the cause of the loss could not be established, was it just assumed to be the sub-postmaster's fault?
Well, initially it would have to be, yes.
Well, initially and for always.
Well, subject to any, if it ended up as a suspension, there would be investigations to try and establish what had gone on.
And if there was an investigation that tried to establish what had gone on, with the sub-postmaster saying, I'm not responsible for that loss, it's a system-generated loss, and he could produce no evidence of that, what course would the investigation then take?
I would imagine we'd look to the expert domain to try and see if there was an issue.
Can we turn to the debt recovery process, please? And you refer at paragraph 19 of your witness statement. And there's no need to display it at the moment. You refer to your role, which was to consider what was being proposed, this is on the policy front, from a contractual perspective, and suggest improvements to existing working practices. So this is your involvement in the development of policy so far as debt recovery is concerned. And if we go forward to paragraph 47, please. Which is on page 19. you say, I did author one document, Operators in Service Debt, and you give the reference. My recollection is the reason I took on the role of author of this particular iteration of the Postmasters in Service Debt policy was because the previous owner and author were no longer with the Post Office and the document needed to be updated to reflect working practices. Can we look, please, at poll 308 8579? We can see that the title of the document is at the top of the page. We can see authorship is given to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if we scroll down, we can see the first iteration of the policy seems to be version 1 in September 2013. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And we're now dealing, I think, with a February 19 version.
Yeah.
So in the year that you left.
Yes.
And if we go to page 5, please. And scroll down. And scroll down. Does this set out the decision-making levels and repayment process for sub-postmasters in debt?
Yeah, that's 646, I believe, is the people who had the authority to agree repayment plans over these different terms.
Was it part of the policy that negligence or carelessness on the part of the sub-postmaster had to be established before they could be said to owe a debt?
No, I don't think that is in the policy.
It's not, no.
No.
And why is that?
Very poor excuse, but I don't think it was ever in the policy, and basically the work I did on this was to update the policy to reflect the actual working practices that were going on at the time, because the previous policy had been superseded in different areas.
And so by that answer, do I understand you to mean that although the sub-postmaster contract meant that a debt was only owed if negligence or carelessness on the part of the sub-postmaster could be established, that was never in fact translated through to the debt recovery process?
I don't believe those words are in that process, but like I say, I don't believe they were ever in before on the iteration that I amended either.
And so is that again because of the prevailing beliefs and norms in the Post Office that all loss was the responsibility of the sub-postmaster?
Yes.
And again, because the mention of the existence of the contract was thought to create a belief in the sub-postmaster that all debt was his responsibility.
Yes.
Was that one of the things that you felt challenging in a ethical or moral way?
I think so.
To trade off a mistaken belief?
I think so.
And how far did that trading extend, trading off that belief? Was it only in relation to debt recovery, or did it extend to conduct investigations, suspensions and terminations?
I think probably more at the fore in debt recovery.
And can you explain why you think the belief was more at the fore with debt recovery?
Well, I think the terminology was that the contract was never sort of quoted as it is written. It was always paraphrased as the sub-postmaster is responsible for the debt.
Was that in the knowledge, though, that that's not in fact what the contract said?
Well, I think some people had that knowledge, others probably didn't.
As the head of the team with a national responsibility for your area of the country, you had that belief and that knowledge?
I knew the wording of the contract, yes.
And what prevented you from speaking up to say, hold on, we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of sub-postmasters on contracts here that have as a trigger for their liability a certain word. We're trading off we're taking enforcement action, we're bringing debt proceedings on the basis of a mistaken belief, knowingly, that they may have misunderstood and they may not have known the true position. What prevented you from speaking up?
I don't really know. I think some of the my views sort of developed over time, where perhaps I just got more concerned about this or more worried about it. It wasn't. I don't know what stopped me speaking up. I'll be quite honest with you.
What do you think would have happened if you'd spoken up?
Probably not a lot.
And why do you think not a lot would have happened?
Well, I guess it wouldn't be the sort of things people would want to hear.
And why wouldn't they want to hear it?
Because it was going against the sort of practice that had been going on for a while, or a good number of years.
Were postmasters advised to take legal advice before entering into either the sub-postmaster contract or the NT contract?
I don't think so, but I cannot honestly remember.
Can we look, please, at poll 302-1748? This is a series of questions that the second site, and you remember what second site was, posed to the post office, and the attribution of them in the right-hand column of the questions to various experts within the post office business. And can we turn to page 14 and 15, please? Can you see the heading is the contract between the post office and sub-postmasters?
Yes.
Second site asks, please provide full details of the following. The measures post office takes in order to reduce the risk that incoming sub-postmasters who take over an existing branch and its staff may be inheriting employees who've been found to be or are suspected of having been incompetent or dishonest. In this context, was there or is there now any competency and integrity verification, performance appraisal or formal disciplinary warning process whereby outgoing sub-postmasters and post office's own line managers could warn incumbent sub-postmasters where questions had been raised? What was the answer to that?
I know when we were talking about the contract in an application interview, the postmaster it was explained to the postmaster about if they take on staff, the staff are their employees. If there was an existing branch they were moving into and there was staff already there, that they were perhaps changing the terms of or something like that, that they should take advice on TUPE, the Transfer of Engagement legislation. The staff were, I don't think that it was ever said you should talk to the, what we suggested you talk to the outgoing postmaster about in respect of the staff.
Can we go over the page to page 15, please, and read 12.4? We understand that the Post Office does not recommend that its would-be sub-postmasters take legal advice prior to entering into that contract. That's the standard contract.
Yeah.
This appears to be contrary to best practice procedures. For example, the British Franchise Association recommends that independent legal advice should always be taken prior to signing a franchise agreement. Please provide full details as to why Post Office does not comply with this best practice recommendation. You regarded the contract as unfair.
Well, yes, weighted in one direction, yeah.
Did that play a part in not including as part of the onboarding process a suggestion to sub-postmasters that they take legal advice about its terms?
What, my view of the contract?
Yes.
No.
What were the reasons then that what Second Sight described as best practice was not followed?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
Sorry.
I mean, say the onboarding process was very similar for many, many years that Post Office Limited used to use. I don't know why there wasn't anything explicitly mentioned as part of that process when somebody's appointed that you take legal advice on the contract. I know it was an obligation under network transformation that the appointed individual had to, or the appointed entity had to sign the contract. I know that was a requirement.
Can we turn, please, to poll 308 5836? And this is a two-page email. If we read from the foot of the page, please. An email from Angela Vanden Bogard, who was the head of network services at this time. And on the 1st of May 2012, she says to Craig Tuthill, who I think was the National Services Support Manager, Craig, I met with Simon Baker today. He's been asked by Alex Perkins to find a way of demonstrating that the Horizon system is robust. Just stopping there. Would that sentence fit in with the sort of ethos and beliefs of the organisation that you described earlier, that the imperative was always to prove that Horizon was robust rather than having an open mind as to whether it was or it wasn't?
The organisation told us it was robust.
Continuing, and not subject to glitches as claimed by the JFSA former sub-postmasters. An MP is spearheading their campaign, and in particular the Hamilton 2003 case. The MP is to visit the model office in a week or so, and Simon would like us to provide an easy-to-understand walkthrough document of our appointments and training approach. This is where you come in, no doubt ably supported by John, I think that's you, and or Lynn and Sue. Mm-hmm. And over the page, I attach a note, we're going to look at that in a moment, that I provided to Sue a few weeks back so she could explain to Alice what our approach is. would you use this as your starting point, amending and update it as you see fit? Would you also embed the supporting documents, e.g. the training offer documents Sue recently pulled together? The claims from the JFSA former agents include that they were not aware of their contractual obligations in terms of making good losses. What we need to do is detail the points at which they were advised of this in the contract advisor's interview script, the declaration that they make on transfer, and the SPSO contract they signed. I'll send you what information I have, etc., etc. Then if we go back to the first page, please. Mr. Tuptill says to see the updated document with input for Sue and John. At the moment, I can't see any evidence that you, who are a copy to this email, provided any additional input. But let's look at the document that was attached. That's poll 308 5875. And can we go forwards, please? To page 4. Do you understand this is something that was shown to sub-postmasters?
I honestly don't recollect this document at all. And when you say shown to sub-postmasters,
yes. So at the point at which they are either about to be recruited or have been recruited.
I wasn't aware that was the case. I don't remember this document at all. And I think it's entitled cash management.
Yes.
So if it's entitled, I'm not sure.
If we go back to page 1, just so you can look at it.
Yeah. Are you? Is it the thought that this was part of the application process?
That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm trying to investigate.
Well, I don't think it was, because as part of the application process, as part of the interview, the sub-postmaster would be introduced to a number of terms from the contract. Okay, and I think there was a checklist that was used by contract advisors to go through that information. That document there, or this document here, I do not recall at all. I don't think it was part of it.
If we just go over the page.
Go back to page 4.
Well, hold on, we just go to page 1 so you can see a bit more context, in fairness to you. Yeah, sorry, the next page. Thank you. Just have a look. The question hypothetical at the top, it's sort of a lecture on why cash management is important.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Well, I think, cash management was always important, primarily because obviously there is a cost to funding the network with cash. And also, there was a potential risk if you're holding excess cash and anything was, if the office was to be attacked. And I know there was a requirement to, daily declare your cash holdings, because I think that helped decide how much cash the branch would need for cash deliveries and things like that.
So you would say, I think, summarising, that this document is not really addressed at the issue that I'm asking about, which is informing sub-postmasters of their liabilities and responsibilities, contractual obligations under the sub-postmaster contract. This is addressed to a different issue.
This is not, I feel 100% certain this was not part of the application process. when we were interviewing an applicant for a vacancy in the network.
Would the term of the contract that I drew your attention to earlier, with the trigger for liability of negligence and carelessness, etc., specifically drawn to sub-postmaster's attention, to say that's the fulcrum upon which your liability turns?
At the application interview, when they were going through the contractual clauses, there was that would be one of the clauses that is explained to them. And I think the terminology that we've been using today, careless error, negligence, was actually in the text. Certainly when we sent out with, I think it was the interview to, the invite to interview, there was a written document that went out with that letter that went through different clauses of the contract that we brought to applicants' attention.
Thank you. So on that note, can we break now until 1:30, please?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you very much, sir.
See you.